Welcome everybody to the new May
Recording
session
in progress.
of Women Leaders in Academic Research and Empowerment of Underrepresented Researchers here at the NIH. Lecture series goes back a number of years, and we are super excited to be here today and to welcome Yael Bensoussan, who you'll hear more about shortly. And I want to turn it over because I always promise that I won't talk that much. Then
John, I'm sorry. I
go on and on.
Also busy.
John, you could mute, please. Thank you. I can recognize the voices, which is part of our topic today. So we're really happy that Dr. Bensoussan's here, though, and I'm going to turn over in a second to Jocelyn, our chairwoman for the lecture series. But before we go there, I just want to share some future speakers and panelists with dates to be announced on the website. But we're super excited. Janice Newsom from Emory, who's also who's going to tell us, I think, some very cool things about global IR. And Judy Wawira-Gachoya is a super speaker with a really incredible voice on AI, informatics, and IR, and some of the other ethics related to AI. That's really look forward to hearing her speak. She is an amazing speaker, having heard her speak recently. And then we'll have a panel of speakers, Renee Cruya, the Executive Director of the Academy of Radiology Research and Biomedical Imaging Research, Susie LeBlanc from Focus Ultrasound Surgery Foundation, who's the co-CMO there, Jenna Eberly-Stack, who's the Executive Director of SIO, and Lynn Jeanette Savick, who's a number of things, this physician scientist, and started Talk Tuesdays, which is a cool lecture series. I encourage you all, those of you interested in early career research and also in IR and IO in general, to check it out this summer on Tuesday evenings. So I will promise to shut up for a little bit. Jocelyn, take it away.
All right, welcome everyone. This month we celebrate Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So a little bit of history here. So in 1977, the U.S. Congress commemorated the history and contributions of Asian American communities here in the U.S., the same month in which the first Japanese immigrants came to the U.S. in 1843. We also commemorate the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad on May 10th, 1869, as a majority of workers who laid those railroad tracks were Chinese immigrants, and that's why NHPI Heritage Month is in May. So a quote that we wanted to share: our attention turns to better understanding the diversity of this portfolio. When we categorize AA and NHPIs as a single group, it masks the diversity of languages, cultures, and costumes of many countries and regions that are represented. In fact, this monolithic view of AA and NHPIs also makes it difficult to understand the disparities within the AA and NHPI communities.
It's a bit of a conundrum because the more you label categories that you want to celebrate and point out heritage and diversity, the more you label. And in general, things may get diluted. So NIH is addressing the leadership disparity gap. And this is from senior NIH leadership, and a direct quote from the EDI website. AA and NHPI individuals represent almost 20% of the NIH workforce. However, the representation in senior leadership position lags behind the percent of the overall workforce. This doesn't go into all the activities and actions and being proactive that NIH leadership is taking.
So Kamala Harris was sworn in the first multiracial American, Indian American, Asian American, African American, and female vice president of the United States. She said, "You may find when you walk into a room that you're not the only one who looks like you or has your lived experiences. My message is, walk in with your chin up, shoulders back, knowing that you're representing the voices of so many people who are proud that you're in that room. We're all in that room with you. You're not walking in that room alone." She also said, "To the children of our country, regardless of your gender, our country has sent you a clear message. Dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see yourself in a way that others might not see you, simply because they have never seen it before. And we will applaud you every step of the way. Beautiful quote.
Albert Einstein said, "We must not only learn to tolerate our differences, we must welcome them as the richness and diversity which can lead to true intelligence."
In AI data diversity's strength and the millions of your micro decisions that each of us will make will define the breadth of our future heterogeneity. We define the future that way. We cannot change anything until we accept it, said Carl Jung. And between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our responses lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor Frankl.
AI science needs diverse data. This is a silly real-life example of biased AI, in which a robot vacuum cleaner in South Korea sucked the hair of a woman sleeping on the floor. The non-diverse team involved in the training data collection did not anticipate or consider the scenarios of people sleeping on the floor, although it is very common in some cultures. Looks like her hair was eaten as she slept.
There's a recent article published by the Wall Street Journal just this month discussing bias in AI. They said it's easier and cheaper to address bias from the beginning than try to remove it later. But many companies lack systems, processes, and tools for doing that. They found out that AI systems have been found to be less accurate at identifying the faces of dark-skinned people, particularly women, to give women lower credit card limits than their husbands, and to be more likely to incorrectly predict that Black defendants will commit future crimes than whites. They say we need better guardrails and standardized frameworks.
So NIH All of Us research program seeks diverse data. There are many other research groups that have shown the power of very large cohorts for biomedical discovery.
So recently in Nature, there was a paper a week ago or so on AI diversity and the crisis that we're in. We're facing a diversity crisis. If it isn't addressed promptly, flaws in the working culture of AI will perpetuate the biases that ooze into the resulting technologies, which will exclude and harm entire groups of people. On top of that, the resulting intelligence will be flawed, lacking varied social, emotional, and cultural knowledge. Beneath this veneer of, oh, AI is the future and we have all these sparkly nice things, both AI academia and AI industry are fundamentally conservative. AI in both sectors is dominated by mostly middle-aged white men from affluent backgrounds. They are really attached to the status quo. 80% of AI professors are men. Black individuals made up just 2.5% of Google employees and 4% of those working at Facebook and Microsoft several years back.
AI is big or bad or good, or all of the above. Stephen Hawking said, success in creating effective AI could be the biggest event in the history of our civilization, or the worst. We just don't know. So we cannot know if we will be infinitely held by AI or ignored by it, and sidelined or conceivable destroyed by it. Next slide, please. So today, we want to welcome Dr. Yael Bensoussan. She's going to present us leading large NIH-funded consortiums, lots of lessons learned from the first year of the Bridge2AI program. Welcome, Dr. Bensoussan.
Hi, everyone. I think I need permission to share my screen, or I'm too early.
You're good. We're going to do a little intro, and it can be with your slides in the background or not, either way.
Perfect.
Yeah, so as a very impressive woman, Dr. Yael Bensoussan is chief of the laryngology division and assistant professor in Department of Otolaryngology, head and neck surgery at the USF Health Morsani College of Medicine. She directs the USF Health Voice Center, the first of its kind. Dr. Bensoussan is highly trained and skilled in voice, swallowing, and upper airway evaluation and treatment. She is also an avid proponent of multidisciplinary care and has led multiple patient education initiatives around tracheostomy care. She completed medical school at the University of Montreal, surgical residency at the University of Toronto, and fellowship in laryngology, voice, airway, and swallowing disorders at the University of Southern California. Dr. Bensoussan's background also includes a degree in speech pathology, and she draws from her prior career in music, which led her to a passion for the voice and for laryngeal disorders. She also obtained an MS in System Leadership and Innovations at the Institute of Health Policy, Evaluation and Management at the University of Toronto, where she applied AI tools to laryngology. Her teams are integrating AI within voice research in the context of healthcare, digitization, and data-driven care. Passionate about optimization of health systems efficiency and algorithms of care, she is building bridges with multiple partners to integrate technology to optimize quality of care. Dr. Bensoussan has served on the Voice Committee of the American Laryngological Association, ALA, and was awarded the Young Faculty Practitioner Award of the ALA in 2021 for research on AI and gender-affirming voice care. Dr. Bensoussan is the co-principal investigator of a multi-million-dollar NIH-funded grant from the Bridge2AI program, Voice as a Biomarker of Health, a 12-institution effort to build a large-scale, ethically sourced human voice database to help diagnose disease. She also co-chairs the steering committee of the Bridge2AI program.
So today, Dr. Bensoussan will talk about the Bridge2AI program. It funded its first consortiums for data generation projects in 2022 with the goal of building large-scale multimodal databases that are ethically sourced and are ready to fuel AI research. Gathering multidisciplinary team science is not an easy task, and many challenges in terms of social engineering need to be addressed and navigated to obtain tangible results. Dr. Bensoussan will share her experience in co-leading the Bridge2AI Voice Consortium in its first year of funding and review do's and don'ts of team science.
Well, I'm very excited. That was a very, very, very kind introduction. So thank you for that. And I really want to get to my important lessons. So I'll go right ahead and get into the subject. So nice to meet you, everyone. As they mentioned, I am the co-principal investigator of this large project called Voice as a Biomarker of Health, which we're going to talk about today. So diving right into it, are leadership skills inborn or acquired? So that's a really good question, right? So you have a really nice couple here who just got a baby, and they say, congratulations, you just got a leader. So are leadership skills really, are you born with them, or do you get them from experience? And this is a quote from Colin Powell, who is the previous Secretary of State, and he actually disagrees. Leadership skills are acquired. So he said effective leaders are made, not born, and they learn from trial and error and from experience. And I kind of agree with him, but I do think they are some genetic predispositions. So let's see this quote. So this is a quote from someone named Isaac Bensoussan, who is my dad. And he used to tell me, and he still tells me, if you're good at what you do and passionate about what you do, then others will want to build it with you. And he said that in French because he's French speaking, but I won't go for the translation. And my dad is and was a wonderful leader. He was an immigrant from Morocco that went to France and then Canada. And he was not a researcher. He never led multi-institutional NIH grants. But whatever he did, he was a leader in what he did. So he got to Canada, and right away he got together all the Sephardic Jewish community and became the president of the Sephardic Jewish community. Then he was a high school teacher, and he became the president of the Union of the High School Teachers. And what was really important, what he did, is that he had a desire to make a change. And I do think that I inherited those skills of wanting to make something different and to optimize things and to make a change for people around you. So where do I come from? You guys made a really nice list of the things that I did in the past. I was born and raised in Montreal, and I was a singer for a short and exciting career. Then I did med school. I did my residency in ENT. I did a fellowship in a T of ENT, which is really the larynx, the throat. And then I did a master's in system leadership and innovation. And I have 3 kids and only 1 husband that you can see here on the right, and who I really love. Where U of T, University of Toronto, led people from medical backgrounds. So we had to be trainees from medical background, and we were taught by different healthcare leaders and from politicians and also from business and industry leaders on how to integrate innovation within healthcare system. And that was really a wonderful experience. Because when I was younger and when I was in med school, I didn't want to be a researcher because I thought that all researchers were like this on the left, right? I thought that researchers were people who were studying molecules, and I was a big extrovert. People who knows me know that I'm definitely not an introvert. I was really bored under the microscope, and I couldn't see myself being a researcher. I identified like this big extrovert person, liking a lot of people and surrounding myself with people. And I understood with this master's that there's really more than one way to make an impactful change in science and healthcare, depending on your personality. So some of the people who will make big changes are researchers that study basic science and make great advancement or great innovation. Some are clinicians or surgeons that can impact lives, a few lives at a time, but really a huge impact on people's lives. We know that public health people can make a huge impact on health system. We've learned that during COVID. Not necessarily information about science. They can fund projects and make a huge impact. Regulators, advocacy group, and where I found myself was really the leadership in the healthcare system innovation. And one of my mentors that I remember and that really pushed me to go into my field and to do this master is a surgeon called Dr. Jonathan Irish, who's a head and neck surgeon in Toronto. And he was in charge of a program called Cancer Care Ontario. And what they did, because in Canada, as you know, the healthcare is public and centralized, then they looked at really centralizing how cancer care was given. And to do that, they said, well, we need data. So he put together a whole infrastructure to get data from people having a cancer diagnosis and looking how long it would take for them to be treated. And based on that, they just sent people with cancer to high volume center where there was expert care. And when doing that, they realized that they could increase the survival rate by more than 10%. And he told me, yeah, by switching to high volume center care, we showed we could increase survival by more than 10%. Can you imagine how rich I would be if I sold a drug that can increase survival by 10%? It would be insane. And that's really what, for him, healthcare leadership was. He said, as a surgeon, I can impact a few patients' lives per day, but as a good healthcare leader, I can potentially affect millions of patients at a time. So today we're going to talk about the Bridge2AI program. We'll talk about the consortium and our team, the progress we've made in year 1, and we're going to go over 10 lessons that I learned the hard way in my first year of co-leading this wonderful program. So a little bit about the Bridge2AI program. We talked about Colin Powell, who said that leaders learn from trial and error and experience. This definitely has been the biggest experience and challenge to my leadership skills throughout this year. The mission of the Bridge2AI program is a program from the Common Funds that was announced about two and a half years ago now. And the goal is really to build large-scale data sets that are AI ready. The NIH realized that there was a lot of data that was captured within NIH programs, but that was not usable because it wasn't AI ready or because ethically we couldn't reuse the data for ML, for machine learning models. So the goal is really to build new flagship biomedical and behavioral data set, also give best practice in terms of ethical and fair principles, and build resources for improved scientific collaboration. So these are the mission. And when they asked us to, when they put in the opportunity out and we were told you can apply, we were told to apply within 6 different teams to make it simple. So there's a teaming team, team science, bringing everybody together, a team of ethicists, a team building tools, a team developing the standards, a team acquiring the data, and a team teaching the future researchers on how to use these data sets that we were creating. So the team to start with is actually 6 teams working together, all of that to prepare the data in the first phase of the Bridge2AI program. And later on, I'm sure that after 4 years, we'll go into model development and model evaluation. So this was the challenge. And anybody who is part of this program or a program officers know what I'm talking about. They called it a social experiment, and often we call it a social experiment because we were asked to apply in 6 modules from different backgrounds, so ethics, data, AI scientists, clinicians. And then we were told, well, you can get funded 6 teams at a time. We can fund none of your teams, or we can actually fund some of your teams and match you with other teams. And in theory, it's really interesting because you bring people from different backgrounds together. They haven't necessarily worked with each other. And you're like, well, bring all your beautiful minds together and make it work. But in reality, it's actually quite challenging. And this is how we feel most of the time. And we have a lot of fun at work. So we ended up being 4 funded teams plus 2 what I call transplanted teams that have been wonderful to create a full project. So this is our project called Bridge2AI Voice as a biomarker of health. And this is our team. So my co-principal investigator is Professor Olivier Lamento from Cornell University. And then this is just the lead people of our team. Our full team has 50 investigators from 12 different universities across Canada and the United States. And we are one of 4 funded DGPs over 4 years. And our main goal is to build a humongous database of 30,000 human voices from 5 categories of diseases linked to other health information. The goal is really to fuel voice as a biomarker of health and for voice to be used in the future to help screen, diagnose, treat diseases, and potentially even look at treatment outcome measures for diseases. The goal is also to really focus on the ethics of it and the diversity, and that's why a lot of you are here today. And when we look at our sub-goals or our milestones, one of the major things is to create a network of stakeholders. So really the people who will be involved in this, develop the standards of how we collect acoustic data, because that's often not standardized. To develop the tech and the infrastructure, because you can imagine that even sharing data between all of these institutions is very challenging. And also to disseminate the knowledge that we gather. This is our team and how it's structured. So with the 6 different teams and the 6 different pillars. And in the middle, there's something called the Plan for Diversity and Inclusion, because it's really important everything we do that we include diversity, that our team of researchers is diverse, that the data that we capture is diverse, comes from underserved population, underrepresented population, to make sure that our models are accurate when we build them. So as you can see, diversity is at the center of what we do. What we do is we go for acoustic data collection. We really test all the different smartphone, iPads, microphones, because we're trying to build something scalable to make sure that we can capture voice with low resource or low resource setting microphone for it to be scalable and for other people to be able to use it, not only researchers in academic institutions. Our team of standards work with data integration with something called FHIR, Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, because interestingly, voice has really no standards on how it's captured from a digital or technical perspective. So we have an amazing team of data scientists at SickKids just looking at how to integrate voice compared to a CT scan, for example, or compared to vital signs. Our great team of ethicists are from Canada. I'm also Canadian, so I have a bias towards Canadian people. And they ask a lot of ethical questions and legal questions about voice. So how do we collect voice in an ethical manner? Is it a HIPAA identifier? Can we de-identify voice? Can we clone your voice? Can we share your voice? Who has ownership of your voice? And how do we study it if we can't necessarily share it? So those are all very good ethical questions that they're asking, and that we're going to be creating best practice guidelines on. Our team at Cornell is developing the tool. So we're developing an application to collect voice across all diseases, but also the infrastructure to share that data and for researchers to be able to download that data. And then we are supported by federated learning, which is a technology that allows to share data without necessarily sharing the data. So really to optimize data privacy. Basically, the model updates are transferred and multiple institutions can benefit from model updates and have their models learn without having the actual data. So really optimizing the way we share the data while protecting the patients. Our approach goes from quality to quantity. So that's very important for us that all the voices we collect at the beginning in the first year are done in academic institutions with clinically validated data before we scale up, because really a lot of projects that have come out with voice, using voice as a biomarker, get into challenges of inaccurate data or noisy data or messy data that then becomes very hard to analyze. So we are starting in our universities and then expanding over 4 years to people at home. We also collect more than voice. We collect CT scans, vital signs, validated questionnaires, and even whole genome sequencing. So as you can see, we're just increasing in complexity, and that's all going to make sense when we're going to talk about how to make all of that work together and how to make all these people work together. And this is a plan for dissemination to promote what we do in terms of teaching people about voice data, teaching researchers on how to use voice data, and who will be the stakeholders, who will be the people who will benefit from what we build in the future, and hopefully the perennity of our project as well. This is our plan for diversity and inclusion. So lots of different collaborations are made with groups that are underserved, underrepresented, to make sure that they also contribute to the database, and also that researchers from underrepresented communities participate in what we do. And what will define the success of our project? So the goal will be to develop a resource for the community, to fuel voice AI research by disseminating clinically validated voice data. We really hope that they'll have a lot of derivative product and algorithms to answer tangible clinical question that will not be developed by us, but by other researchers, because this data is meant to be open source and available. And we hope to be able to give best practices to the community in terms of standards, ethics, tools, and protocols. So very quickly, I'm sure that if you've followed until now, you've seen that there are probably some important challenges because all of that theoretically makes a lot of sense, but how do you actually do it? The challenges of team science, some of the challenging of team science that we call social engineering here, you can think that all of these people have different backgrounds. They speak different languages, and not just from the basic term of language, but an ethicist doesn't use the same term as a data scientist, for example. They have different personalities. Whoever has ever been in a managing position know that personalities matter. And then people have different incentives. And what is common is that all these wonderful people working together have one single passion, or at least are joined by the single passion, which is the desire to make a change. And in this case, the desire to really use voice as a biomarker and to solve this common grand challenge that is using voice as a biomarker. And I can tell you, when I wrote this grant, I read so much on team science. There's the National Cancer Institute that has a field guide on collaboration in team science. There's a lot of information from the NIH that has been published, but God, there is nothing that prepares you for this type of team science. So it's always harder than it looks. And thank God we have those field guides that are wonderful, but really going on the field makes a big difference in what we learned. So to give you a quick overview of what we've accomplished in the first 8 months. So from a teaming perspective, just putting this infrastructure together from an administrative, financial infrastructure takes time. So that's what we've been doing. We developed consents across all fields, across all institutions, data sharing agreement, and we had our wonderful inaugural voice symposium that we're going to talk about. From a standards and tool perspective, our team developed an app for data collection, a cloud infrastructure with the NIH Strides partner, and also the standards for voice data. And after 8 months, we now have protocols across all cohorts so that we have protocols vetted by a lot of experts in the field, experts from neurology, experts from respiratory diseases, from voice disorders, from pediatric disorders, looking at all the way that people capture voice data for these diseases and really obtaining a consensus on the protocols that we'll be using. And we're actually starting feasibility studies tomorrow. Is it tomorrow? June 1st, in 2 days. We're very excited about it. From the ethics standpoint, we had a really nice stakeholder forum where we invited people to share their ideas, their concerns about ethics, to identify ethical issues. And that was very interesting and eye-opening to see what the actual patients and what the stakeholders think about voice and how it can impact our health. And obviously, they also helped a lot in the way we consent people and the development of our protocols. We had our wonderful inaugural Voice AI Symposium where we gathered 130 stakeholders invested in voice biomarker. It was in DC, maybe some of you attended, and it was truly magical. We're going to talk about it more a little bit in our lessons learned. This are wonderful papers. So let's talk about lessons, and it ended up being 10. It's always nice to have a good number, and some of them might be intuitive, but I'll tell you that some of them I learned the hard way. So hopefully it can give some insight to some of you on the call. So the first lesson is, it's easier to lead a company than an academic consortium. And I've never been at the head of a company, but my husband does, and I have a lot of friends who are leading a company, and I always try to ask them for advice, and it always seems a lot easier. Why? So when you think about it in a company, the leadership structure is clear, right? There's no co-leadership, MPIs, multiple teams, no PI. For this particular grant, we were told, well, there's not really an overall PI, there's just co-PIs, right? And that's great in theory in academia, but in a company, there's a clear structure, it's easy to understand. Reporting. In a company, people report to one boss, right? In academic consortium, I mean, it's so complicated. As a researcher, you report to your institution, you report to your chair, you report to your division chief, you can report to your NIH-PI. So it becomes way more complicated. Your salary, right? Your salary is dependent on efficiency of what you accomplish at work in a company. In academia, not at all. Your salary doesn't change if the project is successful or not. In terms of identity, company identity, you can have a strong feelings of belonging to a company versus in academia, you also have multiple identities, multiple institutions. And to feel that you belong to a consortium is actually very difficult. Location, that's an easy one. If you all work in the same space, it's easier to collaborate. Is for academic consortium, there's a lot of geographical heterogeneity and Zoom relationships. And the goal in a company most of the time is to make money versus the academic consortium goals can be multiple, right? We can be publishing, research mission, a grand challenge. What is really common is the feeling of accomplishment that should be the same in both. And that comes to incentives. So, it's not a company. The incentive is not making money. So what are incentives in academia? And as somebody in a position of leadership, you have to understand these incentives. So in academia, incentives are grants, publication, promotions, tenure, raises, and always think about others, right? Fame, maybe people are in it for fame. Maybe you're working with your secret crush and you just want to continue working with them. Or maybe you like going to free trips on conferences. But jokes aside, it's really important to understand people's incentives, and different people in the hierarchy of a grant or of a consortium have different incentives, right? For me, I'm one of the PIs. I get a lot back when my project is successful versus maybe one of the students that's on it doesn't get the same incentives. For him, publishing is more important, or getting his PhD is more important. Lesson 2. Get to know your people early. And it seems simple, but it actually takes a lot of work to get to know your team, right? Because we're in Zoom meetings all day. We're often in Zoom meetings with a lot of people, and it's really hard to get to know people, especially remotely. So why is it important to get to know your people? One, to because I always say that, you know, if we work together, it's because you can help me achieve my goals as much as I help you achieve your goals, or else it's really the relationship is not worth it if it's not a give-give relationship. And at the end of the day, if you manage to do that, it'll make your project more successful. This is my favorite leadership book. So this part of the talk is usually interactive, but maybe by raise of hands, you can tell me if you've ever read that book. Have you ever read that book? Let's see if we have any. If you have read that book, you can raise your hand or raise your hand in your head. But this is the best book about leadership. It's actually a book about relationships and about love. It's called The 5 Love Languages. It's a bestseller. And I read that during my leadership master's, my leadership class. And what it tells you is really that everybody does things because the way they were, you know, raised or the way they perceive things. There are 5 languages of love, you know, acts of service, gift giving, words of affirmation, quality time, and physical touch. Obviously, I don't use any of these in my consortium, but really understanding that sometimes, you know, people feel they're doing a good job because what's important for them is, you know, that they're doing a good job based on what they think. But I think they're not doing a good job because they're not doing a good job based on what I think a good job is. So really perception is key, and getting to know everyone's love languages and everyone's personality will really help you understand why they are doing something good or why they're not, you know, performing the way they need to be performing or not delivering the way they need to be delivering. My other question really early on to try to understand people I work with is, who do you report to and what is your role and who is your boss? Because that's really important. People will have different incentives based on their role and who they report to, and we all report to someone. And that was a really good example I learned in my leadership class. So just a case study here. This is Dr. Decision. That's her name. She's been elected as the new QI lead for the Department of Medicine, and her goal is to decrease readmission rate. So she's going to do everything she can to provide good care. She's going to tell her residents, don't discharge my patient too fast. Really, the goal is to prevent readmission rate, make sure she gets good care. And then the following year, Dr. Decision, her again, is now elected as Chief Financial Officer for the hospital because she has a lot of good skills. And now her goal becomes to increase surgical beds as they convert to surgical dollars. So what do you think she's going to do? She's going to try to tell her residents, hey, guys, we really need to discharge people fast, right? So the way that she acts will change based on what her role is in her institution, organization, and really what her boss wants her to do and what she gets incentivized for. So understanding your team, their incentives, and who they report to and what their role is really important. Who are you? Where are you from? And where are you going? So understanding people within their own journey will really help you get a team that works together better, because your team is not only there to complete the goal of the consortium, they're there to have their own aspirations. So I always do these exercises with people I work with. You know, where do you want to be in 5 years? And this is a monkey saying, buddy, I'm just trying to make it to Friday. I think there's somebody, is it somebody trying to talk to me or just somebody unmuted? All good? Okay, perfect. So I'm always surprised when I ask this. You know, for example, I was with my team, my clinical team, and I asked somebody I work with, I thought they wanted to be a clinician and see more patients, and I was sending them more patients. And then this person told me, actually, in 5 years, I want to be a full-time researcher. And I said, wow, you know, I'm fooled. And I've actually been a terrible, terrible manager because I just kept giving you more clinical patients, but I didn't really hear what you wanted to do. So as a team lead, always remember these answers when assigning tasks and goals to make sure that they really align with what your team member wants to do. So hopefully, this is Jean-Christophe Billy. People are wonderful, our ethicists and researchers who works with us. Hopefully he doesn't mind me putting his face here on the NIH internet. But really the goal is to align personal goals with a project goal, which will be key. So JC is a wonderful assistant professor, and his goals are to obtain funding as a PI, to build a network in academia, and to develop expertise in AI ethics. So my goal as a PI or a leader is really, first of all, to optimize his FTE, because if I don't, then he's going to find another grant that he's going to be PI on, and all his efforts will go there, and probably he won't deliver much on our grant. I have to ensure that funding goes in his name and he gets all the credit for it to really further his career. And I have to optimize introductions to build his network, because that's his goal. And if I manage to do that as a team lead, then he'll be really happy, he'll stay working with us, and he'll feel value in staying in this consortium. JC, I think he's listening because I'm getting texts from him. So hopefully we're still friends. Lesson 3. Conducting an efficient meeting is so difficult. And I've learned that the hard way. When we started working together, there was millions and millions of meetings. Most of us got what I call now meetingitis, which is the intractable headache and nausea caused by an abundance of meeting. And it's actually very difficult to conduct a good meeting. So when I started, I remember telling my research assistant and program manager, like, this meeting went horrible, right? Why? I don't even understand. And I had examples of meetings that went perfectly and others that were just terrible, just a waste of everybody's time. So I started kind of studying what makes a successful and an unsuccessful meeting. And I have new rules. If a meeting has no agenda, I don't go. And I tell all my people, if there's no agenda, don't go, or call the person who called the meeting and say, what's the agenda? Or else I can tell you that not a lot of things get done with a meeting with no agenda. I've learned that meetings have to have a defined purpose and agenda, and that the person who calls the meeting runs the meeting, and there has to be action items at the end, and someone being responsible for these action items really makes a difference. So it seems simple, but I have about more than 12 meetings a week probably for this consortium, and this is what I do to make sure things get done and what I tell my team to do. And I try to tell people that if after 10 minutes of a meeting, you're wondering why you're there, log off and tell people nicely, hey guys, I have another meeting to run to, because everyone's time is extremely valuable, expertise is valuable, and we want people to trust us that we can conduct efficient meetings. Starting with a blank page at the beginning of a meeting, I learned that it's a bad idea. Often, I went in to say, well, I really want everyone's opinion. Here is a blank page, everybody give your opinion. And it looks theoretically a great idea, but in practice, it goes everywhere. So I've learned to come in with a 50% completed document, ask people for their advice, and then be ready to finalize the plan while we're talking. And that's been very helpful. I've learned that meeting attendance reflects trust, efficiency, and the feeling of purpose. So there are some of the meetings where I see that people just stop showing up. I look at myself and I say, well, something's going on, right? Why did 3 on 10 people show up to my meeting? And then I have to look at myself and say, what did I do wrong, right? Are we meeting too often? Probably. Meeting had no clear purpose. Maybe the last meeting was inefficient. Maybe I forgot to send an invite, but that's on me. Or maybe this meeting could have been an email. So asking your team about the frequency of meeting is key, and it seems simple, but I mean, meetings can kill people. There are death by too many meetings. It exists. I'm a doctor, I can tell you. And it's really important because that's when you show people that you are respectful of their time and their expertise. So I'll often, once a month, I'll just at the end of the meeting, I'll ask my team, hey guys, what do you think about the cadence here? Are we meeting too much, too little? And we adapt. Lesson 4, embracing conflict is better than avoiding them. Again, I read about this in team science, but it's harder to actually do it when it's your project. So one of my biggest regrets is trying to avoid conflict, right? When I started, we were trying to avoid conflict. Status quo is always easier to handle. But if there is a conflict, there's a reason. There's a reason for it, right? It's that people are not understanding each other. Maybe you didn't explain it correctly, but there's something underneath. And usually every time I try to avoid a conflict and then it just exploded, the explosion really was a catalyst to things getting better, right? Because if things don't work out, it's for a reason. If it doesn't work out, then you just abort, right? And you move on. Or most of the time it actually brings solutions. So that was one of my biggest lessons this year. Lesson 5, tangible goals with short timelines makes people happy. So one of our biggest success this year was a conference called the Voice AI Symposium, and it went so amazingly well. I told my program officers this was the best ever show of collaborative research, of collaborative work. Everybody came together, put in their work. They were so happy. They shared ownership of the project. And I asked myself, why did it go so well, right? Because when things go wrong, we try to analyze, but I think it's important that when things go well, to look back on why things go so well. And in conclusion, I think we realized, well, it's a short timeline. It's really a tangible product. You know, people could see an event at the end. People had ownership of their part of their work, and they were so happy to do that at the end. So even if sometimes your project has long-term goals, try to divide them in shorter timelines and celebrate every time there's an accomplishment, because that makes people so happy. A quick lesson 6, not everyone is equal from a task ownership perspective. Often when we have lots of expertise, lots of leadership in the same team, it can actually be detrimental. So I've learned that one task belongs to one person, and you can have helpers, but you can't have 5 people in charge of one task because it doesn't get done. And you would think that adults at my age would know this, but I didn't. So this was one of the lesson, and it's something that I watch happen in other groups that I'm part of, where I see that things don't work out. It's because too many people are in charge of the same thing. So learning to have one person accountable for one task really helps get things done. Lesson 7. That's a good one. Incompetence should be the last answer when asking why a task is not done. So if you have ever been in management, sometimes things don't get done, and it gets you very frustrated. And I think that the first thing that you think about silently, even if you don't say it out loud, is, oh my God, this person is incompetent. This should have been done on time. And what I've learned is that there's tons of other reasons why tasks are not completed, and incompetence is like one of the last one, you know. So I've learned to stop and think, well, why is it not being done? Is it because there's just not enough time to do the task? Was the task that I gave unclear? Maybe the task is not doable or is unreasonable. Maybe the team didn't have the resources to do it, or maybe they don't even agree with the task, or they didn't have ownership of the task. Or maybe there are other competing tasks that they have with better incentives than what I'm giving them. Maybe they do not have the skill set for the task, and somebody else would be better at that task. And then, you know, at the last option, incompetence is a possibility, but usually never the case. You choose people to work with because they're amazing people. So really the leadership mirror is key. So if something doesn't get done the way you want it to be done, look at yourself and try to see what you could have done differently to make this work, or to give the resources to people to make this work better. So that was one of my biggest lessons this year. The lesson number 8, this is in French, for those who understand French. Le jeu doit en valoir la chandelle. What does it mean? So I try to Google translate. It means the game has to be worth the candle, which is probably not the same expression. But really the work that you put in has to be worth the rewards. And you can't expect people on your project with 5% FTE to give 100% of their time and effort to the project. It's impossible. So what I've learned is when you build your grant, or when you build your project or your consortium, it's always better to have more people. It's better to have less people with more FTE than a lot of people with small FTE, because it's really hard to get their attention. You know, if they have 95% of effort doing something else, they just won't spend the time on the project. And that's really not what you want for the success of the project. And you have to think about, there has to be other incentives than the FTE percentage for them to want to participate in what you build together. Lesson 9, we're almost at 10. Clarity is an underrated concept. So large consortium will inevitably lead to lots of confusion. And we're all smart people, we're all academics, but it gets really complicated. And leaders need to provide clarity. You know, what are we expecting from each team? Give a max of 3 goals per person. What's the structure? What's the mission and vision? And in my leadership class and masters, the first exercise they made us do is write up mission and vision statements for lots of different projects. And when we started, we said, well, what's the point? But it provided clarity really fast. And without that clarity, it's really hard to accomplish things, and people get mixed up and then just don't get to the end goal. And repetition is also an underrated and is the first cousin of clarity. So, you have to keep repeating things. Again, we're all academics, but sometimes it gets so confusing that repeating the same things makes a big difference. Lesson 10, check in with your team often, formally and informally. So those are two examples. So this is my iPhone here. And all the red are people from our consortium, from our team. So we speak all the time. I mean, we chat, we talk, whether it's personal or work, and that's really important. I mean, chains of emails really are really difficult for a lack of other polite word. So check in. We're humans. We're not replaced by robots from AI yet. So that's really important to check in with your team, see how they're doing, how happy they are to be part of the project. Are they still happy? Are they thinking of quitting? Why? And that's always really eye-opening. And informally, so we did this year a first survey to the team and asking people to answer with anonymous information. And it was really fascinating even for me to get the answers. So here you can see that 61% of people from my team said, I'm happy with my current role and budgeted FTE, and 39% said, I would like to get more involved and take more responsibility within the project. And no one wanted to stop the project or reduce their effort. So sometimes, there's challenges and it could be frustrated, but just knowing that your people still want to work on the project is really validating and is very helpful. And sometimes it's not as good of answers or sadder answers, but you have to know, and that data is really important. So in conclusion, collaborative research is challenging. Large consortiums will take more time to achieve deliverables than single teams. And consortiums have the potential of making high and durable impact. And I always say this, if it was easy, everyone would do it. And there's a reason why nobody tried to build a large meta database of human voices before, because it's really hard. It takes about 6 months to a year for large consortiums to learn to work together. And that's okay, because the time investment you put into it is definitely worth the type of goals you can achieve as a group compared to siloed work. But from a call to action perspective, collaborative research is way more difficult than individual research. And the call to action to the NIH, which already does it a lot, is we really need to invest in time, infrastructure, and funding of collaborative research, because it just takes more effort, but the potential is so much bigger. And I'm going to conclude on these beautiful pictures and see what kind of emotions they bring in you. Because despite the challenges, the joy and magic of achieving a goal as a group really defines human nature. When I look at these two pictures, of course, I have joy watching those two, but I have a lot more emotions and joy watching the team winning the FIFA Cup. It's also the French team, so it makes me really happy. But really, seeing a team achieve a goal together, win together, it really defines who we are as humans and not as robots. So I hope to be able to continue working with my team on this great project and hopefully more collaborative projects in the future. And I think we have 5 minutes for questions. Thank you so much.
Awesome job. Thanks you so much. Jocelyn, any
Great presentation. Thank you so much. Really nice job teaching us about leadership roles, and really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, feel free to unmute and ask questions or type them in the chat box. So please feel free. I found fascinating while we're waiting. You glossed over it, but your unification thread is being a singer in the past, and your love of music, and speech pathology as maybe a differently trained appreciator of sound. And so those obviously you had passions with. So maybe is it kind of random that you ended up with all your passions around you, or is it because you're embodying and living some of the things you've shared with us today and actually bringing those things that you care about and that bring something special out in you, you bring them closer to you and your decisions match that. Maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. I think I'm really lucky. And because the passion, I think, is really the first step, right? I've always been passionate about voice. I'm really good at talking about my patient and my passion, not my patients, my passion and sharing my passion. And I think that's what probably attracts people. You know, when I put that consortium together, I was a fellow starting my job as an assistant professor, and I had to convince people really cooler than me to join my team. And because I had that passion bringing in from my singing background, from my speech pathology background, I think people can feel that. And people kind of trust you, maybe blindly. But I think people trust other people that are passionate, more than, that's kind of my basic incentive. So I think I was lucky to be able to bring all of that together. And probably that's why people decided to join.
That's cool. I mean, I think you're lucky in that you have that common thread, and you're ending up in a place professionally that unites all of those passions in you. We had one of our fellows, Adam Landa, is in an awesome band, Strutman Lane, they're called. They're on Spotify. And he's really amazing musician. He's passionate about what he does. And he ended up, we had this little audio AI project that he and James Annabelle, Oxcam student, did, that he brought a real appreciation of audio, and he had special knowledge in how to splice and dice and augment the data acquired through social media. And it was very cool to see him in that role as well. So I think everybody strives for where you are, and some of us may not go through it as obviously in tune with our passions. And I think we spend a lot of time numb going through our day-to-day processes and decisions, and often don't always unite our conscious decisions with what we're passionate about. So kudos to you for where you are. Any other questions from the crowd in the few minutes remaining?
So Brad, I'll just answer your comment. My mom raised me saying, you need to have two jobs, one that brings money and that one that you love and that you're passionate about. And if you have two jobs, it's fine. If you can make those two into one job, then you're really lucky. But if not, you'll have two jobs. So,
and I think, you talked about company versus academic approaches, and not making any judgment calls on anything. But I do, the litmus test for me, also from parental and grandparent guidance, is if you wake up in the morning and you're excited to do whatever you're going to do, and that can be work or your personal life, but if that psychs you up, then you're doing the right thing, and it's your karma is and your energy is in jive, and it's going to be additive, and it's going to be contagious. People will want to join the team. Your comment about the field guide to team science is very cool. That's something that we use on a regular basis to have folks think about where they are in their careers and be their own sort of critic. So at the end of these, I'd like to go back through and give a few highlights and points just in summary. And I have company versus academic. Companies a lot easier than consortiums. Get to know your teams and the people that you work with. Your father's view on passion was driving all that you've ended up with as well. Your Cancer Care Ontario motivation, leadership, and the impact, hoping to turn a few patients' experience on a daily basis into something that could impact millions, which is what many in academics try to do in terms of impacting how other people approach disease and suffering, and what we can do together as a team. 10 lessons the hard way, learn by experience. Social experiment, different backgrounds, looking at the 50 investigators and your efforts to put 30,000 human voices in 5 categories, and standardization being a huge problem, both of personalities, people, and the data. I like when you pointed out, I have a Canadian bias. We all have biases to our alma maters, to where we train, to our parental backgrounds, to our heritage, and sort of recognize it up front is super cool. Federated learning is awesome as a theme, sharing data, but not necessarily the privacy issues. and it may be a way around some of the privacy hurdles. Scaling up too fast and taking your time doing it right, key. And I think we all suffer from noisy data, trying to move too fast, and it ends up making a bunch of nonsense instead of actually something worthwhile. Looking at imaging, vital signs, whole genome sequencing, and audio together, trying to cross modalities in AI is cool. The challenges of team science, social engineering, the 5 love languages, which I'm going to read now.
Oh, you should. It's going to make all your relationships better.
Awesome. Who do you report to? Your roles, task goals. Who are you? Where do you come from? Where are you going? Efficient meetings, meetingitis, and not going to meetings that don't have agendas or action items are resulting. And I think Lindsay Hazen, I'm going to call you out for making my life so much better and more productive for implementing that thought process in our meetings. Blank pages being a bad idea, trust, efficiency, and purpose being requisites, and embracing conflicts, accountability with one person in charge. Incompetence shouldn't be the first thing we jump to, although it's natural to jump to it. There's usually other reasons. Le jeu doit en valoir la chandelle. Work must be worth and commensurate with the rewards. Clarity, repetition, underrated concepts. Check in with your team often. I love text over emails, and all of you that have not responded to emails in the last week, I'm sorry. And I think the whole team science challenges and how we can work as a society and NIH as an institution to promote them, incentivize them, make it a lot less about the PI getting to the next grant and a lot more about what we can do together. And that's easier said than done. But anyway, that's my my summary of your wonderful talk. I really appreciate you sharing with us and taking time out of your busy life, personal and professional, to share something and give something back. And I hope everybody enjoyed as much as I did. Any other comments? Anybody in the audience?
Oh, I saw a question here.
Oh,
Kelsey
good.
said, you very nicely highlighted how companies differ from academia. It seems we in academia could learn a lot from company structures, but the mechanism to learn those skills or structures while in training in academia are not the easiest to build in. How do you think trainees can better build and develop this skill set and mind? This is a very good question. So just so you know, Kelsey, when I started this project, I called all my buddies and family that had leadership roles in industry and asked them what they did, right? So instead of asking my other doctor, like, oh, do you have a platform for project management, right? Because I had to find a platform for project management. I called my cousin who's in charge of Bombardier airplanes and leads a 50-people team. And I said, how do you get things? I'm not going to say the S word on NIH Zoom. How do you get it done? And I really learned from him. So I try to learn. So as a trainee, you can do it too, right? Just ask people from your family, from your friends, how do they get things done? And now I think there's a lot of ways that you can get more into industry as a trainee. So I know now there's programs that let you go do, internships in industry, lots of industry academic collaboration. So I think that even NIH is going towards this. So when there's opportunities for these collaborations, just jump in them, right? Go do internships in the summers to see how they do things in industry, because I think we have a lot to learn from them. They have a lot to learn from us too, but I mean, it goes both ways.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Last going, Jocelyn?
Thank you.
No? Awesome. Well, really appreciate y'all. Stay tuned on the website. Folks who want to check in with Janice Newsom and Judy Gachoya, among others, directors of advocacy groups and societies coming up, which we're really looking forward to. Thanks so much for joining us after a long weekend. Hope it was an awesome one. I hope this short week also speaks to whatever passions you may have. Take care. Thanks so much, Al.
Thank you so much. Bye.